welcome back to my channel. And today's video is going to be much longer, as I promised that I would do my best that I can to get you all some much needed content. So today's topics is some troubleshooting, diagnosing of why this four-wheeler will not start. It has an occasional now and then start to where sometimes when on a cold start, you push the button, it fires right up, runs for a few seconds, and then shuts off. So then when you try to go to start it again, it just spins the motor over. And then it starts backfiring out of the carburetors. I put my hands over the carburetors. Seems to get it to want to start up, but then it pops and it shuts off. I've been playing with a little bit of it in the background, but today I think I figured out what the problem is, and so I'm going to show you guys beginning to end of how to fix a Raptor 660 when backfiring out of the carburetor. I'm going to show you guys how to remove the cylinder head, give you some helpful tips along the way so you don't snap these 8mm bolts in the head. Hang tight. You're going to see a lot more content in these videos. So I'm going to get my tools together. I'll pause the camera and go get my tools, and then we'll go ahead and saddle up. Okay, the tools that we're going to be using today is going to be a 12mm. That's going to be for your oil tube that goes up to the cylinder head, and also for down at the crankcase down at the bottom right side. Then we're going to need a 10mm wrench. You can use whatever, your preference. 10mm ratcheting wrench, flex head, open box end, it'll work. For these hex screws, these things can become a problem sometimes. So I'm going to try to help alleviate your stress so you don't find out the hard way. Sometimes these bolts, they get stuck in there and it'll strip. Once it happens the first time you feel that first pop, don't go any further. Let me tell you an easy way. For each one of these, they're torqued down, they've been heated, they've been bonded, they've been rusted and corroded to the inside of the threads. Without using heat and all that, it's not necessary. What you want to do is you want to send a shock down those bolts. So what you'll do is you'll get your hex bit, looks like this, and it has the extension on the other end, and put it down in there. Take a hammer, don't maul the crap out of it. If somebody else has worked on it and they stripped it out, you can get yourself a series of bits like this, and it's a 5.5mm. That's probably all the bigger that you're going to need. With that, you're going to have to use a little bit of force. So it also may help to loosen the handlebar bolts. Pull your handlebars forward a little bit, tighten them back down so you don't accidentally strip out your handlebars. In my case, I was able to get it just by turning the handlebars back and forth. I do apologize for the wind that's blowing, but it's going to be dying down here soon. This is early in the morning, so it should be dying down here soon. So yeah, what we're going to do, find yourself a bit that fits it first. And then, like I said, don't ball the crap out of it. Just hit the back of this with a hammer. Just give it, give it a little bit more than a friendly tap. Because if you hit it too hard, you can damage your threads, and then you'll never get it out without being easy with it, causing yourself more of a problem. So that's the story on that one. With the carburetors, I've replaced my carburetor boots, so I may have different style screws than you. Some have hex screws that holds them down, and some have Phillips head, some have Phillips head plus flathead to back those screws out. So in my case, I'm lucky. I have Phillips head, so you'll need a Phillips head screwdriver. If you have the same kind I have, you take those screws out, and then remove your carburetors out of the way. And then, of course, you unplug your spark plug wire. The other tool that you're going to need is a 3/4. Yours might be different in size depending on the maker of the spark plug. Mine takes a 3/4. So to make it easy for this, you take the plug wire off. Take that off. Get that out of the way. Take your socket. Put it in there first. Then take your extension. Put that in there. And then take your ratchet. Take the spark plug loose. You can, once it gets real easy, pull the ratchet off. Use your fingers and untighten it. Take the spark plug out. That's an easy way. Once you get it out, some might have that rubber insert because it's an actual spark plug socket. In my case, I don't have that. It went bye-bye somewhere. So making do with what I have. Then with my case, I use a magnet, put it down the hole, and pull my spark plug. So basically right now I'm giving you the shakedown of the tools that you'll need for what part of the bike that you need it for. It'd be good if you had a rubber mallet. So when you get all these hex screws out, you want to be, you don't want to be reckless. Okay, that's I can't stress enough. You don't want to be reckless when doing this, because if you damage the surface of the cylinder head or the cylinder jug, it's going to create you a lot more work. So don't use a flathead screwdriver in between there. Give it a couple taps here on top. Give it a couple taps here on the side. Give it a couple taps on the other side. And do it kind of back and forth. You know, work your way around it. Going in the upward motion. You want to try to encourage that cover I call the skull cap, which has your lifters, intake lifter, and your exhaust lifter. So you want to be cautious. You don't hit that too hard because it's cast aluminum. You hit it too hard, you're going to crack it, or you're going to put a fracture in it, and you can't just replace the skull cap. Because when they make these things, they take the cylinder and they take the skull cap, they take the valve cover, whatever you want to call it. It's your choice to call it whatever you want. So during production, they put them together in that area where the camshaft spins around in. They bore at that point. They bore it through, so it becomes, now these are two one pieces. Okay, two has now become one piece, functioning piece. You take another one off of another bike and stick it on there, you have two things that's going to happen. You either got really lucky and got the one that was so close of a match that it did not harm anything. But if you get the wrong one in there, you're really not going to know it when you pinch on your camshaft. Okay, it has to be precise, and there has to be X amount of free play in there so it can spin freely, but not recklessly going all around inside there like this, or being too tight on one side and not the other, and you clamp down on it. You're going to wear that one side out, and then that camshaft is just going to slam right through that skull cap, that valve cover, and it's going to throw the cam right off of there. Then you got an even bigger problem. This stuff ain't cheap. You're going to ask me how I know. So I wanted to clear that up, that you may, 1 out of 10, may have one that is a very close match, that it did not harm it none, but you get the wrong one, and it's going to cause a lot of free play with that camshaft, and you don't want that with how many RPMs that this thing can produce. Your gas tank is in that area. Your privates are back here. You don't want to play that game. You don't want to risk that. Trust me. Okay? It's a difference between a $400 job and a $2,500 job. And that's no labor. That's just parts. $2,500. So anyone wants to question me on that, I have receipts. I build these bikes. I'm not the most sharpest tool in the box, but I'm not a dummy. I pay attention. I listen to many of people, many of bikes. And when you do it enough, you'll know what to do and not to do. So that's why I'm trying to help out with this video. So for those that can't just afford to go pay $1,000 or $2,000 out to a shop, fix their bike, they can go get another bike for that price and maybe have a couple things wrong with it that they know how to fix. So let's not render your bike useless. So I'm going to push forward. As I think of things, I'm going to try to put it in easiest, simplest detail as I can. Sometimes I like to ramble on a lot because I like to get my point across more than just one way, because not everyone's the same. Not everyone perceives things the same way. So sometimes I have to go back, re-explain in a different way, so it's more beneficial to the person. Anyone can do it at that point, is my goal. So, next tool. Okay, so we are now coming down to the time chain tensioner. So that's going to be the first thing that you do when you go to take this skull cap valve cover off. I'm going to say two different things. I'm going to call it a skull cap, and I'm going to call it a valve cover. So, skull cap valve cover is going to be taken off after you take this tensioner off, take that oil tube off. That's what provides oil to the top half of the motor, to the cylinder head, your valves. And about halfway down the block in the front, there's another hex screw. Again, if you have that trouble trying to pull that screw, go to the next size up to where you have to take a hammer and tap that hex bit into the screw. And at the same time, it's sending a little bit of a shock down that bolt to help encourage, to break the rust, to break free the corrosion that's built up over the years. It helps loosen it up. It definitely works. So for the ones that are stripped, I'm going to go back across that deal. The ones that have gotten stripped because someone else tried to do it and they just kept trying to go to the next biggest one that you can find, the Allen bits. But it won't fit the rest of them because I had to force this one into that and it broke loose. So I have to use this, 2 different sizes, to pull those off. And that, to me, is a lot better than having to drill, die, tap, and all that stuff. You don't want to have to do that to your bike. Trust me. First thing is your timing chain tensioner. You take that off. You don't have to pull the spark plug, because that don't hold down the skull cap. That actually goes right down into the cylinder head itself, so you won't have to remove that, but pull your plug wire. The next thing you will do is you'll take a 12 millimeter, you will take off this banjo bolt and go down halfway, pull the hex screw out, go down to your follow the hose, the hard line, down to your right side crankcase. It's just right behind the water pump. It'll be directly right behind in there, right near that fat hose, the return line. So with that, what I found to be easy is to use a 12 millimeter socket with a 3/8 to a 1/4 inch adapter and use a 1/4 inch drive socket. That's a 12 millimeter, and that's the perfect distance to be able to get that bolt out of there. And that I found to be the easiest way to pull that out. With this timing chain tensioner, some people don't understand how to get it to retract back in. So on that tensioner, there's a big bolt. To make your job a lot easier, you take that out first before you remove the tensioner housing itself. That's the one there, it's one there pretty tight. So you back that off first, you'll get a spring, the spring will come out. Set it off to the side so you don't lose it. Then you'll have 2 8 millimeter bolts. So you would put your 8 millimeter socket on, back those 2 out, take it all the way out, and then pull the whole housing out. So when you go to install it, and I'll say it again later in the video as I put it together, I'll explain how to put it back together, but I'll say it here in case I forget. So once you get that in the spring out of there, what you want to do is reset it. So there's a little lever sitting right across the top here. You want to push that up and then push that plunger back in. That's what presses up against your timing chain guide, which keeps the tension in on the timing chain, so there's no chain slop. So once that's in, you can let it go, and that's it. It won't pop out until you put that screw and that spring back in there. So once you got that plunger all the way in, do not put the bolt back in it. Don't put the spring back in it. But if you're the type that's worried that you're going to lose the spring, you're going to lose the bolt, well then do it. It's not going to hurt nothing. Put that back in. So you keep it together as one piece. When you're ready to install it, what you want to do is pull that spring, pull that bolt off, and remember to put your the grooves that's on that plunger, make sure that's facing, it only goes in one way. You'll know it when you go to put your first bolt in, then you go to put the second one in, you'll notice that something ain't right. Flip it over. So again, pull that lever up, push the plunger in, then put that unit on there. Okay, because people, what they're trying to do sometimes is they're trying to drive it in, and I'll show you what happened on this bike. They tried to drive it in without retracting that plunger, and they broke the, what I call is the ear that the bolt goes through that holds that on there. So don't try to run that bolt in there if that plunger is sticking all the way out. It don't have enough strength to push that in because it's locked by a spring-loaded, and it's got a little foot or tab that sticks out, and it locks it so it can't come back in. So make sure you take care of that. So again, plunger in, and then put that in, tighten it down, which are 8mm bolts. And you do not have to go gorilla tight. It does require a gasket. You can use gasket sealer. Stay away from the Permatex blue. That oil will dissolve it. It will get in your motor, and it will clog up your oil filter, and it'll cause you a nightmare. You'll never get the stuff out until you pull this motor, pull everything out of it, and then blast it out of there. It gets stuck up in your pickup screen, and when that blocks the oil off to the oil pump becomes worn, it becomes damaged, and then the top half of your engine, if you ain't paying attention, will be oil starved. Your valves won't open and close. You won't get proper lubrication, and your motor will overtake that camshaft and wipe it out and blow the top end of this motor. So pay attention to what you're doing, because like I said, it's a difference between a $200 or $300 job versus $2,500 job. That you had to replace all the internals, you had to replace one of the side covers, you had to buy yourself another starter, you had to buy a crank, a piston, the cylinder head, especially the cylinder head. That could set you back $1,200. A used one will probably get you about $800, maybe $900. So really pay attention. If you care about your bike, you want it built, you want it fixed, and don't want to waste your time, pay attention to what you're doing. So I'm going to pause the video here, and I'm going to, because I know it's boring watching me pull all those screws out. All you're going to see is the back of my head, so I'm going to hand you guys some respect. I'm going to take all those screws loose. There's no certain sequence to take them loose. Some people may argue that point. With me, I start in the center and work my way out. So when you put it back on, yes, you do have to go in the sequence, because if you tighten down the outside perimeter of that skull cap, that valve cover, and then you put screws down the center, what you have done is you bunch that up in the center, and now there's a little space in between. And what's going to happen is you drive those screws down in there. It may not happen the first or second one, but you'll get enough in there, it'll force that center down, and you'll put a crack right into that valve cover. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, take these guys out, and I'm going to show you that there's a little trick to this, because there's 3 bolts that's not going to allow you to pull that valve cover until you pull those 3 bolts out. So I'll show you where they're at when I get to that point. So I'll come right back. All right, so for that oil tube down at the bottom that goes right in between the exhaust and the hose for your coolant, you want to use a 12mm, and you want to use a socket adapter, 1/4 inch drive, and that's all the further you need. You can just get right smack in there and just take it right out. Not a problem. So once you take the oil tube off the top, there's another hex screw, which is just towards the front of the oil tube. So you'll have to make sure you take that off. The other thing you really got to pay attention to, I watch it happen all the time, so you guys really got to be careful. So right on the back side of the motor, you'll see your cap right here that covers the intake valves. take that off completely, okay? You can leave the bolts in there and set it off to the side. It's a little trick I'm going to teach you here. So just to the back of that, reason why you have to keep hitting the camera, the reason why you have to take that cap off is because directly right behind the valves, right here, the intake valves, just on that little lip right here, there's two small hex bolts. Same size as the one that's on the valve cover and the skull cap. So you got to take those two out, take them out completely, because you do not want them falling down into the motor. Because if it gets too far to the left, because you're hitting over here, those bolts come over here, they'll drop down in the motor, and you're going to have to go much deeper and hope that you might be able to get it to come out down there by the one-way bearing. So be careful. So I'm going to pause the video again because I'm going to do the light tapping and getting the valve cover off, skull cap. But there's a little trick that I want to show you about these screws. You don't have to worry about the orientation of them for one reason. And that I will show you here the reason why. So let me pause the video and I'll get right back with you. Okay, so for starters, on your left side, when you're sitting on the bike, the three screws that I mentioned are going to have to come out in order to pull that skull cap. So it'll be the one here, top left corner, that comes out. Then front left corner, right where the camshaft area is, where it's rounded. So you have one here and one here. They're both going to be the same length. The one that's at the very corner of the skull cap is shorter. And you can see how much shorter it is. Right there, you can see how much shorter it is. So, yeah, there it is. All right, so you can see the difference in them. So these three have to come out in order to get that to come off. So you just take that, lay it to the side. The other thing that has to come off is the air ventilation hose, the crankcase ventilation that goes from skull cap to the oil reserve. So that'll have to come off. So in my case, this thing is going to come off real easy. I won't have to hit on it. Again, I've already had it off because I was checking the timing on it. So the little trick is about your bolts. Say you had them mixed, set in a pegboard. Some people use a piece of cardboard. They draw an outline of their skull cap so they know the orientation of where these bolts go. And their little kid brother came in and scrambled the bolts all up. Don't stress out. Don't stress yourself. That's minor stuff. It's real easy. As you put these bolts in, the bolt depth going into the cylinder head will only allow that bolt to go but so far. So what you do is, once you got those three big bolts out, set the longest ones out to the side. Now what you want to do is, while the valve cover or skull cap is off, put each bolt in where you think it goes. Turn the valve cover sideways and look at it this way at the very bottom. If all the screws look the same distance, about that far out of the bottom of the valve cover, skull cap, then you know they're in the right place. But if you got them, one sticking out like this and the other one sticking in here like this, take this one out, stick it over there and trade it. Take it out of that one, put it in that one. That's how you know the proper orientation of those bolts. They all are the same grade bolts. They hold the same strength. It's just one's longer than the other. So that's my little trick. So I could take all these bolts and just pull them all out and not have a problem putting them back in for that reason. So I'll stress it again to make sure that you guys understand. When you pull this little cap off, pull this cap off of your intake valves. Okay, when you take that off, set it down off to the side. Make sure you have your rubber O-ring with it. There's 2 screws that sit right next to each other, in between, right at the carburetor and the base of that skull cap. Pull those 2 Allen screws out. They're only about that long. Pull them 2 out. A lot of times I see people make the mistake. They forgot to pull them out and they broke the skull cap. And then they tried to JB weld it back together. It'll never hold for a, once it gets heated up, oil starts getting in there because it's metal that's been heated. It's trapped oil in it. It ain't going to last long. It has nothing solid to grab onto. So to save you tons of time, tons of money, JB will work. The quick steel will work temporarily. But you'll have to keep going back doing it again. And the job that's the worst is the one you have to keep coming back to. So trust my word on that. So now we're going to pull the skull cap, valve cover. I'm just going to call it skull cap. Now you guys know what I call it. So you guys call it whatever you want on your time. I'll call it what I want. So now we have an understanding. I didn't want to have to keep saying that throughout the whole video because it gets boring to you guys, and I ain't here to bore you. So now I'm going to pull this skull cap off of here. And it comes out real easy. Okay, so now I'm going to show you what I'm talking about with the volt. Okay, so I'm going to explain something here. Let me get a screwdriver so I can show you. I think I found my problem. Okay, during startup, just when you're hearing the engine spin over without it running, what's supposed to happen is these are your fly out weights. They fly outwards like this. This one and this one. Okay? They fly out like this after it starts up. Once it starts up, they stay out there. Okay? So both of them will stay out there like that while the bike is running. So during startup, you can see right across the lobe of the cam, I'll get it in view here. There's a little dimple right there. Okay, that little dimple right there is for auto decompression. That thing there can cause a lot of people a lot of headaches. Because if you're trying to start your bike and it sounds like your bike's starting really, really slow, like you got a dead battery. What's happening is it's either stuck. Well, I would say it's stuck closed. So you're getting full compression that you're fighting against with your starter in the battery. So at that point, it puts a major load on your starter and your battery and your electrical system. Problem with that is you can burn your wires up if it don't blow the fuse. I'm having the other type of problem where my decompression is on all the time. Somebody apparently had put this together, and I'll show you here in a second why I think, as a matter of fact, I know is the reason why I have a problem. But then again, I may have 2 separate issues because I should not be backfiring out of my carburetor. But I'll show it to you again. Right here, you see right here, that's the auto decompression. That little button right there. When these fly out weights, they go outwards, that's supposed to go in. That's not going in. It's not going in at all. So, and I'll show you the reason why it's not going in. See this little pin right here? There's a little pin here, a little pin here. This little wheel right here rotates back and forth. These little pins are supposed to be sitting in these grooves. They're not sitting there. They're supposed to be in that groove. So when I pull the flyweight out and try to get it to go in there, I can't get it to go in. So it's supposed to rock forward and then backwards. Right here to here, here to here. And somehow it jumped over this. So what I gotta do is take these two 10 millimeters out, clean them up before I put them back in, because I'm going to use red Loctite. I don't want those falling off inside my motor. Some might want to use blue. Some will complain, oh, red's too much, you know, you'll never get it back off again. No, they'll come back off. I've done it, not a problem. So, when people build 686s, they have this issue of decompression not engaging. More likely the bike sat for too long. Got that pin stuck in there. Cause you a resemblance issue that your battery's dead when it's not. Or you'll be killing your battery prematurely. Because the auto decompression is to release the compression until the bike starts. Once it starts, fly out weights fly outwards and keeps rotation. Now, this is on your exhaust side. So it opens your exhaust slightly to allow too much compression to go out the exhaust, so it can turn over easy. That's why you hear shoo, 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 shoo. But if that is stuck downwards, and it looks like that hole right there is going to go shoo, shoo, shoo. And you put your hand on your battery terminals, so you'll feel that they're getting really hot. That's your first indication. It's not the battery. Could maybe the starter. You can use a stock OEM starter. If you look, pull up my other video, I explained that. And I showed that it was a bone stock starter starting a 686, split of a second. Bam, no problem, fired right up. So, either starter got a bad connection, or it's this guy not releasing compression so it can spin over until it starts up. It could be your fly out weights. If they do not open and close on their own like this, real easy, then that's what the problem is. So I'm going to pause the video so I can fix this and get this back together. Means I'm this far down into the cylinder head. I'm still going to pull the cylinder head because a used bike, I don't know the history on. I don't know how long it's been since it ran. I don't know how the valves are. And only because it's backfiring out of the intake, this could be the issue. So hang tight, I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to play with this. One more thing. There's a half moon ring that goes here. So when pulling this camshaft off, be careful. You do not drop that in your engine. You lose that, you'll more likely never find it again. So that's another reason why I'm pulling the cylinder head. And then if I have to, I'll pull the cylinder jug and go down further until I find that thing. It may just never made its way back on, but I don't want to put that kind of money in here and find out that that got into the crankshaft gear and it just blew the engine case. Okay, guys. So during verification, see here, there's little tabs I mentioned on the center shaft. These were sitting out here. These were pushed out here like this. And I figured out this is my problem. This is why it's backfiring outside the carburetors. Because this gear can only go on but one way. Okay? It's either 180 degrees out, and these ain't going to fit in here, or it's going to be right the way it's supposed to be. And now, when they go here like this, it pushes it back in. So when you're rotating that, see how that pin right here, right at my fingertip. Let me see if I can get it in better view. Okay, so when I open up the flyout weights, it's flat the way it's supposed to. So now you got full compression. If you watch real closely, right here, see how it popped back up? So I'll do it a couple angles so you can see it pop back up. See there? So that's what the problem was. So now I'm not going to have any more backfire issues. So bike's backfiring outside the carburetors. This is out of timing. And so is these right here. So that will throw your timing completely off. So if you ever have to replace your flyout weights, you better be careful. Or if you've replaced the gear and you had the flyout weights, be careful, because they need to be inside that little groove right here, just like that. And it'll set you right where you need to be. So when you let go of it, it's like that. So when it goes to start up, that's what happens when your starter engages. So now you got full compression. But it's like this, so you lag in compression. So it's allowing the compression to get by a little bit so you can take the load off the starter and your wire harness and your battery. So remember that, okay? So I'm going to pause the video. So they're all sticking out the same depth. Well, let me push them back in. The skull cap down through the cylinder head and also down into the cylinder jug. So that's why they're going to be longer. So we'll set that down. And I'm going to have to pull my cylinder head because I have to check the intake valves. Actually, I want to check them all because I may just replace them all. So for this job here, once you get the carburetors off, set to the side, get your chain tensioner off, which I haven't done yet, because to me it's not going to matter, because I'm going to be going down just to the top surface of the cylinder jug, so I can actually take a look at the piston, see the amount of free play that's in it, also check the valves. So my job's going to be a little bit more intensive than just playing with the valve lash and playing with the camshaft. So if you have issues with anything below your camshaft and below your valves area, you may want to stick around for this, because I'll give you some helpful tips on this also. So the exhaust pipes, those bolts are 10 millimeter unless somebody's changed them. You're going to be in a high risk of those either coming out, you're either going to have a stud sticking out, or you're going to have the stud and the nut come out. That's fine. That's why it's made like that. So if the stud is stuck and it was actually a bolt, then your bolt would be stuck. But it gives you two chances. You have your nuts that will actually be able to come off if the stud couldn't come off, and that's why they're like that. So with mine, I already got them off. They were off when I got the bike. So now I'm going to pull my exhaust, and then there's in your case, my case, it'll be 10 millimeters. I have to go get them. So there'll be 10 millimeters, and then I have to take off the two 8 millimeters for the chain tensioner. So when taking that off, you can take it off as one piece, but crack that bolt loose that has the spring. Crack that loose, because you're going to fight like hell to try to take that loose when it's off the bike. You put it in the vise, you're risking damaging the ears on the tensioner, and then you'll have to go spend $24 to $30 for another one. So crack it loose at least, and then you can pull it out, and you'll be fine. Then it's going to be 12 millimeter. I prefer using the 12 millimeter 3/8 because of how close the edge of that bolt is to the cylinder head. It has a thinner wall socket that fits down in there perfectly. Then get yourself a 3/8 to a 1/2 inch adapter and use your breaker bar, or you can use your impact gun. Impact gun will crack them loose a lot faster and easier. Breaker bar, when it starts cranking on that slowly, gives it more of a chance. In my opinion, it seems like it gets stuck. So using the impact, I put it on the highest settings and give it a quick creak, creak, and on each one, and it cracks them all loose. And then I'll run them out with my hands so I can feel my threads as it's coming out to make sure the bolt didn't stretch. So if those bolts stretched, you don't want to reuse them, because what will happen is one end will get stuck down in there and the other end keeps trying to twist. Then you done boogered up your threads on your bolts, and then it's going to get stuck in there. And if you look back at my Articat video, you'll see exactly how that happened of what I'm explaining. So even though I ran the bolt down, it was fine. Coming back up, the one end of the bolt stretched and was stuck in there, and it skipped across the threads, and I couldn't get the other end to try to come back out of there. So the bolt ended up getting snapped, but I got lucky. It left me enough bead on there to where I was able to get it out of there. So I don't want to see that happen to you. So you have a choice. You can leave your carburetors on at this point, but it's easier just to take them off, kick them back to the side, get in straight to the head, lift the head up without having to rearrange a lot of stuff. So your coolant hose is going to have to come off. It's going to be a Phillips head. You take that loose, take a big pair of channel locks, take the hose back and forth right where it's connected to the metal. It'll break the seal, and then you can take it with your hands and pull the hose off. So I'm going to pause the video again, and we'll get back to business here. Okay, and so for something else here, to that, I'll just add one more piece in. If I was to go ahead and continue taking that cylinder head off, means I went this far. Your chain guide. When pulling the camshaft off, it's easier. This is in the front of the motor. It's easier to get the camshaft out, take more tension off of it. Pull that up out of there. Go underneath that main crossbar in between the two bars that are at the frame where the engine mount is. Pull it up. It's going to be a little work, but get it to go underneath of that and have it come out. Then you can have it easier time of pulling that chain off and putting that chain on. So once the camshaft's in timing and it's back on, do not put in your tensioner yet. You need to have something to hold that camshaft down, or you're going to have to repeat the process. Do not put the tensioner in until this is in. So the first thing's going to go after you do your camshaft and your timing. You're going to put this in. Once this is in, then put your skull cap on, snug it down, and then put in your chain tensioner. That'll be the sequence you go in. So I'm going to wrap it up, and I'll get right back to you. I'm going to pause the video for a minute. Okay, so now with your camshaft right here, there's a dot here and a dot here, right on the surface edge of that cylinder head. One dot goes here above it, another dot here goes above it. Once you get it close to where you think it's supposed to be, take your finger and push in the hole where your camshaft tensioner goes, and see if that camshaft rotates back to where it's lined up. When it's lined up and your line inside your crank is lined up with the flywheel through the sight hole, then you know your bike is in timing. So the next stage to go to would be I like to put a little grease on the camshaft because it doesn't have a lot of motor oil. It'll take a moment for the oil to get back up to the cylinder head. For that reason, I like to put a little dab of oil on down the valves, make sure they can get proper lubrication. I put a little grease on the camshaft, and that half moon key that goes underneath that very far end on that side of the bike, make sure you do not drop that. Stick that inside that cylinder head first with a little bit of grease, and that'll help encourage for that to stay there. Then put your camshaft in. Then that way you have no risk of dropping that down inside the motor. So right now I'm at that point. My camshaft's in timing. It's set down in there. It's ready for the skull cap. So I'll show you a little trick of putting a gasket on there. Some what gasket sealer to use, and what is gas and oil resistant and will hold up. And it's a lot like Yama Bond. It's a gray color. It does a great job at sealing everything up. It does a perfect job. So on the valve cover, skull cap, a lot of people just like to glob that on and then tighten it down tight as they can get it. Well, you just created yourself a big, huge problem. You don't want to do that. But you want, because what's going to happen is you're going to start getting that sucked up into that small hole. It's about 3/8, quarter of an inch round, and you're going to get Permatex stuck in there, and it's just going to create you a mess for the top half of your engine. The oil, the return, it's going to get clogged up. Your camshaft's going to be clogged with this blue death from hell. That's what I call it. It's blue death from hell. Don't use it for oil and making gaskets and all that stuff. To me, it's garbage. So I'm not being sponsored by any Permatex or any of that, so I can say what I want about it, and I'm being respectful about it. It's only through my personal use that I will never use that for this purpose. So instead of taking it and just globbing it all in there, take it and put a little bit on your finger and dab each bolt hole. You got a nice little thin coating that each bolt hole. When you take your finger and you smear that around after you've done all the bolt holes, and you smear that around the whole entire top half of the cylinder head, you're finished. That's all you need. You'll even have extra that's left over. You have to wipe it off your fingers. So use it sparingly, but ride a fine line with it. You don't want that stuff floating around in there, clog up your oil filtering. You don't want it to clog up any of your ports and your jetting of the camshaft, the crankshaft. The shafts are hollow, and oil has to be able to go through it, through the passages, the journals. If they don't go through it, that's one area that's not getting proper lubrication, and then you wonder why your engine just blew. And you're now spending almost $2,500 repair because you went overly excessive with the stuff. If you're just not able to seal that area, stop and think about it. It's not done right. Take the cylinder head off. Take the skull cap off. Get yourself some 320 grit and run it back and forth with a little bit of oil on the sandpaper. And go back and forth with it until it's flat. I like to use glass top and just take the sandpaper and glue it down with some spray glue. And put me a little bit of oil on the sandpaper and run that back and forth. Don't press down on it because you're going to dig marks into it. You want to just let the weight of the skull cap do itself. You'll know you've done it right because when you wipe it off, any of the dark areas is where your leaks are. So now you know where your leaks are. You have to do that whole entire surface area until you don't see any more dark marks, scratch marks from people's screwdrivers. Like I mentioned in the video, don't use a screwdriver. That's what causes leaks. That's what causes these problems. And each time that you file that down because somebody used screwdrivers, and depending on how far down they got it, remember, you're tightening up around that camshaft. So watch what you're doing. You only want to take off a little bit just to see where your scuff marks are, where your leaks are. Once that's done, then use finer grit. Use like 400, go to 600, and that should be it. You shouldn't have to go any higher than that. And then it should be nice and smooth. It should be like glass. When you lay that skull cap down on a piece of glass, it should be able to stay there no matter what spot you push on. It's not going to do this number. Any direction. So pay attention to that. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up and bring you guys back for the next segment of the video. What we have here is a 2005 Raptor 660 having some recent starting issues. Original owner claims that there was brand new piston rings, brand new valves, valve guide seals, springs, lifters, and well, he couldn't get it to start, couldn't get it to do anything. So I've gone through just some simple basics, you know, and now it's becoming to be a little bit more tiger deep. So I'm going to have to be a little bit more aggressive. So what I've witnessed, carburetors were clogged up, improper needle jets, pilot, the main jets and idle jets and all that was wrong. The fuel petcock was clogged up. Gas tank was not too bad, but it was junky. I got it cleaned out. So now we got proper fuel flow. Fuel line was clogged up with those mud diver bugs. So they clogged it up. So it had no fuel being able to get to the carburetor. The starter solenoid has two fuses. One is just to hold a spare fuse in case you blow one. Well, my homemade camera stand is not holding up too well, but it actually puts you in a better angle. All right, so just making sure it don't take off anywhere. So the fuse that actually goes to the solenoid was blown and gone. So I grabbed the one out of the fuse holder that was just for a spare, put it in there, no dash lights, and when I turn the key, nothing comes on, but you hit the start button, you know, it'll start up, well, spin. Right now the battery's on charge. It got a little weak trying some stuff out. So there's quite a few things that's wrong here right out the gate. So I traced everything down. The whole entire harness is intact. The timing mark for the flywheel was boogered up. You can't really see it, but I was able to play with top dead center. Got it to where it's supposed to be. The valves are opening and shutting when they're supposed to. I want to show you where we're at now with this. All right, so let's see what we got. We got everything put back together now and got everything lined up. And carburetor was a little bit boogered up, a little bit dirty. And got the timing set on it. And the parking brake, also disconnected that. The exhaust is off because the exhaust is plugged up, so we're only going to do a short boom boom, and then that's it, just to show you guys it does run. So here she goes. So there you go. Turns out the valves were good. Carburetor boots are good. Carburetor was a little bit junked. It was definitely out of timing. The valves were too tight for the exhaust side and the intake side. So I later found out about the exhaust after I fixed the intake. Then it started backfiring out of the exhaust. So then once I readjusted those, I had loosened up all four of them, made it to where they were rappy tappy so you can hear it like a little. So once after I get it up and running for a little bit, then I'm going to tighten them down just a little bit to spec, and then they should be fine. However, you can see down there, I got a nasty oil leak. That is coming out of the tube because somebody tightened the banjo bolt a little too tight, and now it's not seating. So rather than try to fix it with a booger job, because I'm planning on selling this bike to somebody and I don't want to pass a problem to them, so I'm going to take the side cover off and I'll just probably put it online for sale if somebody wants to play with it, with the knowledge that it's boogered up, because I do not like selling the bike to somebody if they have issues. So they're not going to have issues because I'm going to guarantee the bike. It appears the battery is charging. It appears that it's starting the bike just fine. Everything was fixed up here. The problem originally was the camshaft decompression was not lined up correctly. So I took the gear off, and I will show it in the video that it was not set in its grooves in the center shaft to spin the fly. Well, the fly out weights are supposed to rotate the center of that shaft to put your auto decompression pin outwards during for startup. Once after it starts, the fly out weights stay out and the pin retracts back down inside the camshaft. So this thing has had quite a bit of stuff I had to do. So still got the swing arm bolt, still got coolant to check for leaks, and bleed the system. Make sure there's no air pockets in the coolant. Make sure there's no leaks in the radiator, hoses, thermostat housing. Make sure it's opening and closing properly. And well, then I gotta adjust the clutch. I'm going to have to fix the front brakes on this because it's not able to maintain pressure, probably due to it did not have any fluid. So I'm going to clear out the brake lines, start with fresh fluid. Then I'm going to bleed the system and see if we can restore our brakes. And it's going to need some exhaust hardware to keep the pipes from flying off. I got to clean out the mid pipe. Appears to be possibly clogged a little bit. So that might be a little something. So with the timing chain tensioner, if you look right here, this is an unfortunate, okay? Because somebody did not back that off. When you take that off, and I got a leak on this side, so I'm going to have to fix that. Had to take this cover off to find the timing mark. And then I had to make it fresh so it stood out so you knew where the timing mark was. It was scuffed for some reason. I guess somebody was trying an old dog trick, trying to get it, the flywheel off. That is not how you do it. You don't smack on that. It's a magnet. You will demagnetize it. If it rubs up against something for too long, heat will take the magnetism out of it and it will render it useless. So do not mess with your magnet. Do not hit it. It scrambles the positive and negative energy of the north and south pole of the magnet. Excessive heat will do it, and you will lose all power to the bike. So if you get it to that point through heat, you seriously got a problem. So cautious of what you do. Hitting it will demagnetize the magnet, so do not hit on it. Use the proper tool that is rated for it and what you're supposed to do with it. So make sure your ground wire is here or here. Make sure you tighten it up. Without proper ground, you will hear like rapid clicking, rapid fire, or maybe nothing at all. Or you might keep popping your fuse, or you'll strobe light your solenoid to where it's just, and that's all you'll hear. It won't try to do nothing. With the way I ran this engine, this thing is really cool to the touch. So even before I started the video, I started it up just to make sure, and it looks like we have it resolved. So now she's just starting right up, just like she's supposed to. Glad that section is over with. So now the real fun gets to begin here. So stay tuned. I got a lot of editing to do. I'm going to have to merge a lot of videos together and clippings. So if you guys like this video, give me a thumbs up. Give me a like. Subscribe to the channel if this is the kind of material you want to look at and want to know how to do. Let me know. If you got any questions, drop a comment down in the comment section. I'll be sure to try to answer you as fast as I can. And also, little quick tip without looking at the VIN number. If you look back here, the square tubing, aluminum, is, oh, actually, I don't think it's aluminum. Yeah, aluminum. That's a magnet. It won't stick to it. Okay, there you go. That's steel. That's aluminum. It's only sticking right up here. So this right here tells you between an 04 and 05. It's square. If it's rounded like this, then it's the older version, the one that has the terrible transmission problems. Tears out second gear. You go to pull up on it from first to second. No, from first to second, or from neutral to first. Wants to keep dropping back down into neutral or half-fast, and it starts that grinding of your gears. So that's your 04 to 05 rounded frame back here. That's your 01, 02, and 03, 2000. So I could give you a little insight without having to decode the VIN. So thought maybe to throw that out there. Any useful information, I always try to throw it out there. And plus, not only that, it has the emergency brake. It's set right here. You swung it forward, and that will put on your parking brake. So if you was on the hill, it wouldn't roll away on you. You got rid of that. Somebody took it off. So I left it there like this, so you could buy the actual emergency brake and put it back on there. It's a shame because it's a good feature, because you wouldn't want to go having to chase your bike down the hill. So, again, give me a thumbs up, give me a like, give me a comment. Got any questions, ask them, and I'll do the best I can to send it your way. Hope you enjoy. Have a good day.